Hello, this is Derek's mom. I promised I wouldn't embarrass him, but I have to tell you, so many people have asked me so many questions, and from beginning to end, and I know I've given a little bit, on his channel when I was talking about him at one point, but excuse me, but my mouth gets so dry, so I'm sucking on a vitamin C. So that's what I'm doing. Anyhow, I just want you to know that, you know, this was 1966 that I got pregnant with Derek. And I was not ready to be, I was not ready to have another child because I could really take care of the two that I had, which Ty was born in 1962 and Letitia, everybody calls her Tish, she was born in 1964. My husband left me, and he left me when she was 3 months old. Told me he had to find himself. And he came back at one point for a couple of weeks. Apparently, he had found a little bit of himself. But anyhow, I got pregnant with Derek. He was separated from me at that time, but he had a girlfriend, a very wealthy girlfriend, and he didn't want her to know about my pregnancy. So he paid for me to have an abortion. And I can tell you, he almost had me talked into it. And this was 1966. And it was very hot in Los Angeles. And I was just off of Hollywood Boulevard, or Sunset Boulevard, I'm sorry, in Hollywood. And this was when, abortion was illegal. And this was before, Roe versus Wade. And of course, it was an extremely dangerous at that point in time. But I was blindfolded and led up to a second floor in this Spanish stucco building in Hollywood, and just off of Sunset Boulevard. And I was told to wear a wraparound skirt with no panties. And like I said, it was 1966. And it is so clear in my mind when I tell you that it just did not feel comfortable, did not feel right. But I had a very strong individual in my ex-husband. He could talk anybody into anything. And I was weak, but yet in another way, I was strong at that time. And I can tell you that what was so amazing was I kept hearing this voice in my head. And as I'm led into this room blindfolded, and I could hear the locks, being locked on the door, and there must have been, in fact, more than many. But as I was blindfolded, I was laying on this table. And under this blindfold, I could just barely see the window in front of me open. And I could hear the click, click, click of the fan above me. And all of a sudden, I hear this loud voice in my head going, "Why are you killing my child?" Boy, I tell you, before I knew it, I literally jumped out of that second story window. I knew that the bushes below, because I had seen them, they were huge, and they broke my fall, thank God. Well, the next thing I know, my legs, my backside, I was just bleeding from just the scratches that I had gotten on my body. And I had a ponytail. I only weighed maybe 105 pounds at the time. Hard to believe now, huh? But anyhow, I just want you to know that when I jumped out that window, and I felt somebody pulling my ponytail. And it was my ex-husband telling me that he was going to make me regret the day that I had this child. Of course, he's a different man today. Thank God, because he's older and wiser and a whole lot nicer, and I have forgiven him, and thank God, because I would not want to carry that burden within my soul. But I can tell you that that day changed my life. I had nothing. I mean, I literally had nothing. It was a very bleak time in my life, because when that doctor, Dr. Peter J. Maturo, he's passed on, but he was the one that delivered Derek. When he told me I was pregnant, I thought my world had fallen apart. I cried for two and a half months because I could barely keep up with my two, and it was it was very, very difficult for me as a single mom, and no one helping me. I had a mother who snuck uh, a box of detergent or a care package to me once in a while, but I was on my own pretty much. But I can tell you, somehow, some way, the Lord God, He got me through it. And I can tell you, when I had Derek, he didn't want to come into this world because the doctor, he was a force-up baby. I mean, by the time he came out, he was so bruised up that I said, "Dear God, that's my kid, that's my baby," because he was an ugly little thing. But let me tell you, 3 days later, you know, his bruises were all gone, and then he was just beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Um, I was a single mom, like I said. I mean, my gosh, I can't even tell you. I could give you 3 pages of the jobs that I held as a single mom, many, many times working 2 and 3 jobs. And and Derek, when the father, when my ex-husband, he just would not claim Derek at that time. And he would come and pick up the other two, well, maybe twice a year. It wasn't very often, I can tell you. And I'm grateful for that, only because he didn't fight me on uh, on the children in any way, shape, or form. So that was a good thing. Unlike many women, single mothers today. But I can tell you that as Derek grew, just he was such a smart child. And I have to tell you, during my time pregnant with him, and I worked up till I was 8 months, and I worked in a beer bar, and I would pull that cinch, you know, and I mean pull it tight. I said to Derek one time, I said, I cannot even believe that that you are as smart as you are with all that I put you through, because I, I had that cinch so tight that I'm surprised that he was able to breathe in my womb. But God love him. He said to me one time, "Well, Mom, maybe that compressed my brain." Well, it may have. I can tell you that it was it was amazing, because you could tell I mean, he was so aware of his surroundings, so aware of everything, of everybody. I mean, he was so intellectual, so intelligent. It's just like he knew everything. I remember uh, we were living in Canada. I had moved to Canada, and this was in 1976. And Derek. He was a little spitfire. Let me tell you, he loved being outdoors. He didn't really watch much TV. The only thing he would watch TV on was when they when they were um, when the hockey was on. He loved hockey, and of course he played as a kid. He rode horses. I mean, this kid was just absolutely amazing. And he was a good kid. All of my kids were good, every single one of them. But I tell you, but Derek was, he, like I said, he just loved animals. If you wanted to find him, all you had to do was go to the nearest, creek or fishing hole. But he was always out in the open air. He just loved talking to the animals. And even today, they call him Dr. Doolittle. I think I've told you that before. But anyhow, he was, uh, there was a time, in Canada, and we lived close to what they called Circle Square Ranch. It was run by the 100 Huntley Street, which was like the 700 Club here, but it was in Canada. And we had moved to Canada. I actually moved there to get my kids away from the city, away from just away from the drugs and just everything. And we were living in Anaheim, California at the time that I moved. And we were there for 5.5 years. And during that time, there were so many, many miracles that happened to us. I could virtually write a book about just our time in Canada. But I can tell you that with with at that time, he wanted to go to Circle Square Ranch, and it was a Christian ranch. And I couldn't afford to, to pay his way because it was very expensive at that time. And of course, as a single mom, um, I wasn't making much money. I did end up going to work in the sawmill, and that was the worst job I ever had. I mean, talk about hard. And they didn't want this California girl there. They made it pretty hard on me, but I eventually, wore them down because I'm I'm a very stubborn woman, especially when it comes to trying to make enough money to take care of my children. Because I would, I was mother, father, and provider. I had no help, not financially, not in any way, shape, or form. But I really enjoyed that time, and so I went to work at Circle Square Ranch. They needed a cook, and I went to cook because I'm one of those down home, Kentucky, Tennessee, all where all of my relatives live, and I'm the gravy and biscuits, black eyed peas and ham hocks and fried taters, and that's the kind of cook I am. Just good old comfort food. But when I uh, when I was there, Derek, there were so many miracles. I mean, so many miracles. He watched a blind boy regain his sight after much prayer. I mean, there was so much that happened to him, and that I think literally gave him a foundation. The people that absolutely ran that place was Toby and Terry Invick. They now live in Prince George, British Columbia. Wonderful, wonderful people. And uh, I think Terry was kind of like a father figure to Derek. He absolutely loved Derek. And one day I got a call, and it was from a counselor at the Circle Square Ranch. And this man says to me, I'm the principal of a middle school, and he said, I just wanted to know if I could have lunch with you and talk to you about Derek. And I said, oh, did Derek do something? He goes, oh, no, 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 no. He said, I just want to meet the parent of the most perfect child I've ever encountered in my life. And I was like, whoa, really? He said, oh yeah. And we had lunch, and he said, I have to tell you, he said, never have I ever met a more perfect child in my life, a more intelligent, more well behaved child. He said, probably the most perfect child I've ever encountered. And he said, I just wanted to meet the parent of this child. And I was like, wow. I, I have to tell you, I was so I was so taken back, and I just cried with joy. I mean, what a wonderful, wonderful thing to talk about my 10-year-old son. It was great. But anyhow, this was the beginning of Derek. I think that literally he just had such a love of everybody and everything. And I mean, I can't even think of a single solitary thing that he didn't like, that was good and honest. And I raised every one of my children um, just on the attributes of just being upfront, honest, to have the integrity, to always be on time, to just never just be true to themselves. I wanted them to do whatever they wanted to do. I didn't care whether it was to be the trash garbage man. I didn't care as long as they did it with love, with truth, with passion, and that they were the best, that they worked hard at it. And because nothing ever comes easy. And it certainly didn't for me. And every single job that I had, and like I said, I can't even tell you how many jobs that I had, but every single one of them helped me to raise my children. They were always first, last, and always. I had friends of mine, that girlfriends that worked alongside me, that were giving their children over to their ex-husbands, over to their parents, their grandparents. I could never do that. And like I said, my biggest expense was babysitting, fees. I mean, I spent a fortune in babysitting. Someone coming in to babysit my kids, or paying for a live-in babysitter or whatever. But I worked in Palm Springs. For a good many years, I was a masseuse at some of the hotels down there, and some of the other places. I was a waitress. I made more money there on the weekends than I made all through the week in San Bernardino, which is where I was living. But San Bernardino is 68 miles from Palm Springs, and it was it was viable for me to drive that 68 miles Friday afternoon and till Sunday night late. And I worked the waitress job at night. It was called, it was Romanoff's at first, and then it went to Rimrocks. And I waited on a lot of, old time stars there. I was a masseuse. I learned from years and years ago. In fact, I, had done it since 1959. That's another story. But I became very, very well known. I had people literally flying in from all over, for my gifted hands, which was totally the Lord. Let me tell you, He was the one that taught me how to massage. But I even massaged. I mean, when I say everybody, I mean everybody. You could hardly name anyone in the old Hollywood back in the 60s and 70s that I didn't massage, and it was a joy. It was, I mean, there was one time that I jokingly said, I've massaged everybody but the two biggest ones, and that was Sinatra and Presley. And the very next week, I had them as clients. So it was a good time, and it was a hard time. Me being a single mother, nothing came easy, nothing. But I was able. It was at a time that I was able to teach my kids the important and valuable things in life. And I taught them that hard work was a necessity if they wanted to get anywhere. That truth, you wouldn't have to remember, the truth, because it came out naturally. But getting back to Derek, every one of my kids had a job, every one of them. Even when we lived in Canada, Derek was right there. He was mowing lawns. We were working out of Smithy's Pancake House, which I still think is in existence today. And we would go. I was a waitress there. So was my daughter, Tish. And Derek and Tish and I would go back in after hours, and we would clean filthy bathrooms and the kitchen. And I mean, we worked. We worked every chance that we got. And I will do another video on some of the on some of the miracles that we had in Canada, which was absolutely amazing. And Derek was a big part of those miracles. Actually, all of my kids were. But as Derek grew, it literally got so hard in Canada because it was very, very expensive. It was not cheap by no means. My daughter Tish had gotten married to her first husband, and we had I think Ty, my oldest son, he was living with his father at the time, and I had sent him to live with his father, which was probably the biggest mistake I made. But he was living with him at the time because I felt like he needed a father at 15. So I sent him to live there. So it was just Derek and me, or Derek and I. Anyhow, we got in my little Honda Civic, and back down to California I came. Before I left to go to Canada, I was a pitch woman, and you know those women that and men that are in your county fairs, state fairs, RV shows, you know, boat shows, home and garden shows, selling Ginsu knives. And Derek literally was pitching as well. I mean, he became good at it. And we came back. It was 5.5 years we spent in BC, and we came back in 1982, October of 1982. And the first big show that I did, Derek was, I mean, between the both of us at the Dodger Stadium, I think we made $28,000 in 10 days pitching the Ginsu knife. You know, in fact, this knife is so sharp you can cut ham, lamb, turkey, or ram. You can cut a cow in half, and that's no bull. I still remember that pitch, but and I probably sold a lot of your mom and dads, you know, and your cousins and aunts and uncles that Ginsu knife, because I traveled all over the United States, and we made good money. We really did. At the time, we were living in California, and when we came back from Canada, Derek's backyard was Disneyland. We were living right across, at this motel, and we had our little dog with us, Muffy, which followed Derek home one day, and the owner finally said, "Just take him. He likes you better than he does us." So we had little Muffy with us. So we had a motel room that had a little patio, and we were able to keep our little Muffy dog. And Derek would climb over the gate, or not over the gate, but over the wall to Disneyland. So that was his playground for about a year and a half. And he even went to high school. One of our friends had gotten him into a high school that used to be a part of Disneyland, but it worked out really well. Anyhow, but Derek was so smart that he didn't really have to study. It's almost like he always knew, you know. I mean, he was bored. He was absolutely bored. So he didn't finish high school, and because he just, I don't know, he just seemed to. It just came easy for him, you know. Certainly didn't come easy for me, but it certainly came easy for him. But during that time in 1984, I was on the road. Derek wanted to stay behind, and he was staying with my brother. Well, my brother and his wife, they became homeless, and Derek did not want to be on the road with me. He wanted to be in the closing ceremonies of the '84 Olympics. And at that time, he could break dance. I mean, he taught himself how to break dance. Derek has always taught himself a little bit of everything, just taking you a step back. When we were in Canada, he taught himself how to play the drums. I mean, he's taught himself how to play the banjo, the guitar, any string instrument. But he was just a natural. It just seemed like that if he wanted to do something, he would find a way to find out exactly how it was done, why it was done. I mean, as I mentioned before, I mean, anything that I got him, he would tear it apart. And because he had to know how it worked. He had to know how it was put together. Um, it was the same, when computers came in. He literally lived on that computer every day, every night. I mean, every moment. I mean, I, I hardly remember him sleeping much. And if it was for a couple of hours, that was it. Because he was so hep on trying to make sure that he knew every single aspect of of the computer, how it worked, so it comes easy for him today. I mean, he's the high tech guy. That's how he got it, all of his jobs. The one at Microsoft, the one at Paramount Studios. I mean, he was so beyond his years in. I mean, you'd have thought he was 100 years old with everything that he possessed, and he possessed it naturally. There's just those people that he must he must have been somebody really, really smart in another past life, because let me tell you, everything just came easy and naturally for him. And if it didn't, he would work his butt off trying to figure out, where, what, and how. But getting back to this, he was in the Olympics. He was staying in a motel with my brother and his wife and their two kids. And this was in Tustin, California, in Orange County. And I was on the road selling Ginsu knives, and he begged me, Mom, please, I want to be in the closing ceremonies. He says they'd actually, asked me to choreograph the dance routine, and it was, of course, with Lionel Richie dancing on the ceiling. And I sent money for them. I was sending money for them to eat, and for Derek, for his care and everything. Little did I know that he was spending on these fancy shoes. If you'd have seen them, I mean, I couldn't believe he spent something like $120 for these expensive shoes. That meant more to him than food in his stomach. But but anyhow, he just had to, he just wanted to be the guy that he just I think was proving to himself that he could do it. Anyhow, in during this motel stay, there was this black kid that came down to the laundry room where my son and my nephew were practicing their breakdancing. And he said, "Could you teach me how to do that?" And Derek said, "Sure." Well, this was 1984, remember? And I got off the road. And of course, Derek had already did the closing ceremonies. Of course, they slipped and slid all over the stage because it was raining like there was no tomorrow. But anyhow, I picked him up at the airport in Seattle because I was working in Monroe, Washington at that time, selling the Ginsu knife. And so Derek, I picked him up, and he was so excited. When we finally got off the road, and this, I think, was after I was working in Denton, Texas, just outside of Dallas. Um, we I finally got back to Los Angeles, stayed with some friends for a couple of days until I rented a house. And we no more rented this house, and this black kid is showing up on my doorstep. Well, he showed up on my doorstep, and he virtually didn't leave. I mean, he just stayed. And of course, that's Cuba Gooding Jr. He Cuba was, I mean, is such a good kid. So I had my nephew Sean, my brother's son, and Cuba, and of course Derek. They were the three musketeers, and that's how Derek was. I was taking them to their auditions for commercials, because I think I was the only one that had a car. Cuba's mom didn't have a car at that time, and so it was pretty hard for them because they were living out of a cheap motel in North Hollywood, California. And like I said, Cuba just never went home. He just stayed. And so he was with me on and off, mostly on, for about 4 years. And I could talk about that forever. I mean, there's a long, long story. many, many miracles that happened about that time. But I can tell you that Derek became his manager, and my nephew became his assistant. My brother John eventually, later on in years, became his driver, and I became his nanny for over 20 plus years. But Derek was got to a certain point in his career, and I think it was after Men of Honor and of what dreams may come. Derek actually can look back on those times and tell you that he just could not, as much as he learned, but every single step that Derek took, and he did a little bit of everything. I mean, he sold cars, he put in car stereos. I mean, this kid was doing a little bit of everything. Like I said, all of my kids worked at one job or another. Thank God they got that from me. And you never saw them sitting down, and being lazy. I mean, they knew the value of a dollar. They knew the value of work. They knew the value of just getting out there and getting it done. And I praise God for that. I really do. But Derek at that time, he just couldn't. He just couldn't deal with Hollywood. It just made him so uncomfortable. And with the way I had raised him, he just couldn't deal with the backstabbing and the dirtiness, you know, of that business. So make a long story short, he went to work he applied for Microsoft, and they hired him. And I said, "Did you tell them, Derek, about? Did you tell them about you're not graduating from high school?" He said, "Oh, Mom, I was so proud of that." He said, "Of course I told him. I was honest and upfront." And they hired him because I can tell you that he set that place on fire. I mean, he was as strong as he is today. You just did not hold Derek back in any way, shape, or form. Well, he did that job. He was senior executive for digital communications, and then of course he came back to Los Angeles after living in Seattle, Washington, just outside of Seattle, in Snohomish, and so he came back and went to work for Paramount Studios, and he traveled all over the world. He was getting tired of making billions and billions of dollars for for Paramount and everybody else, and he just got tired of it. And somebody, I think it was a friend of my brother's, talked him into going into a fusion. Derek went into this company, and Derek was a very trusting man. Well, they became very jealous of him, and he ended up they ended up, really, really screwing him over big time. Everybody thought that, I mean, Derek had, I think, 68,000 followers at that time in the fusion. And he just didn't realize that people were so jealous of him. They thought he was the head of the company. He wasn't, he was only the spokesman. And it became a very difficult time for him, to the point that he just could not understand how anybody could lie or cheat or steal, from what he was trying to accomplish and what he was accomplishing. Well, of course, the end result was uh, they ended up, going nowhere. They ended up dying, and they had a huge company going, all because of Derek. And but those were learning experiences. He said, Mom, he said, you take one step, even the negative parts of my life, Mom, I would have never been able to go to the next step to without having to been on the step beforehand. And I understand that. I truly do. No matter what you've done in this life, whether it is negative or whether it is positive, somehow, some way, it teaches you. it helps you to grow. It helps you to grow mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, in every way. And it certainly did Derek. But he went through some difficult times, with that. And then he's him and one of his best friends, who he'd known for years. I won't say his name. His father was a big movie actor on television, but he even went in business with him with another energy drink. And again, he was, uh, he just didn't see it coming. And he was just losing all faith in mankind. I mean, he really was. Especially with close friends, that people that you loved, that you trusted. Um, he was going back. Derek was Kazaa. He was with Kazaa, the file sharing. He's been so responsible. He helped put many big companies on the map. Companies that, including YouTube. He had a part in a little bit of every single one of these big, huge, enormous companies. And and he made a lot of money. He made a lot of money. He lost a lot of money, but it was all a teaching tool. Came to the point where he was back up he moved from Los Angeles and back up to uh, Washington. He loved Washington, absolutely loved it, and so did his family. They felt that was home. He certainly didn't like L.A. He didn't like. Who could like L.A.? If you lived here, like I did. I lived here. I lived in Los Angeles for 56 years, and after a while, when you get to be my age, boy, I tell you, it's not. It's not a good place to live, and so having to deal with that, he went back up to Washington, and he had cancer at that point in time. Um, I was so scared because at that time I was working for Cuba, and Cuba paid my way up to Washington, and because I was still working for him, and I was still a nanny to his children. And I tell you, I've never seen anything like. I was so scared. Derek was skin and bone. He looked so sick. I can't even tell you how sick he was. I remember sitting at the dinner table one night after dinner, and I watched him shake. He was just shaking all over. But he started on cannabis at that time, and I think between that and the power of a mother's prayer, the power of all of our prayers, he praised God. Um at one point, he threw up this tumor, and I remember him taking a picture of it. It was the most horrible thing I've ever seen in my life, and actually threw it up. And after that, he started gaining weight. He became well, but it was a very difficult time at his and Kathy's time together. It was. I don't think Derek was himself. Um, I can't even describe, you know, how he was at that point, but he just at one point he just texted me one night and says, I can't take this anymore. I just want to end it. And I tell you, I was on my hands and knees praying like there was no tomorrow. And he finally ended up back in LA at my granddaughter's doorstep, which was where I was staying at the time, because I was trying to make a change in my life. And Derek, he just looked like a broken man. And we ended up going back to his home in Woodland Hills, which was up for sale. But then it was a gorgeous home. Well, we ended up there for a little while, and all of a sudden, I came back to Prescott. I lived just outside of Prescott, Arizona. I had moved here. I actually been here 4 years now, And Derek, uh, at one point, I was on Facebook, and one of his cousins says, Berdina, um, what's Derek doing in jail? And I thought, jail? Derek's not in jail. And he says, well, it's on Facebook. Aladdin bail bonds, people have a right, they are reaching out to Derek's friends to help him. I I thought they must. There's something wrong here. I mean, why would Derek be in jail? Well, make a long story short, I called the bail bondsman. They said, yes, your son's in jail, and he's going to court on a certain date. Well, let me tell you, living in a low income apartment, which I still live in, and with my oldest son, Ty, I tell you, and at that point in time, I think I was living with my daughter in one of her bedrooms, and I don't know how I got together, but I think between Cuba and several other big high profile friends of Derek's, praise God, they helped me get to LA, because living on my little social security check is and has always been very, very difficult. But I got to LA. It was the day before Christmas, that he was in court. And I traveled on the 23rd of December. And this was 2015, I believe, or 14. I can't remember. But anyhow, I can tell you that when I walked into that courtroom, I was in shock. I could not, for the life of me, figure out how, why, when. I mean, I mean, for my son Derek to be in jail behind bars was so surreal to me. I mean, and everybody around me kept going, Derek in jail? Why? I mean, Derek was the most honest, most hardworking, most serving person you could possibly meet. I mean, there was nobody that asked him for help that he didn't help. And he wasn't a very good husband at that time, because I'm telling you, he was so busy serving everybody else, but and his family suffered for it, and he realizes that today. But I can tell you, and he was still, I mean, he was not a bad father. He was not a super bad husband. But he was not as attentive as he could have been or should have been. And because he was so busy trying to please everybody, because it was very difficult for him to say no. And boy, did he ever take after me, because believe me, every one of us are the same way. You ask us for help, we'll do everything we in our power to help you. But it was difficult watching him. And he looked at me, and he was behind this glass with all these other inmates. And when he saw my face, he just all he did was just hold up his finger and was just, praising God. And it just about killed me. Well, I had to round up the money to get him out. And thank God I did. I was staying with some wonderful, wonderful friends of mine. Larry Antonino, he's with Pablo Cruz right now. He's the bass player. Wonderful, dear friend of mine. And I can't tell you how grateful I am for his time of, allowing me to stay there. I think I didn't stay with Cuba during that time, which I normally was at Cuba's staying. And I don't remember at that time. I think maybe a full house or something like that. I don't know. I can't remember. But anyhow, uh, to make a long story short, I got Derek out, and we went back to the house over in Woodland Hills. No furniture or anything, and we Derek and I, we really had a good time. I mean, it was amazing how he got everything put together. I mean, we were sleeping on blow up mattresses and just making do. It was just an amazing time for us. And I eventually came back to California, and there was some people that had broken into that house when Derek was gone, and I forgot where he was at this particular time, but uh, since one was living in it, these people broke in and they just took over. I mean, they became, you know, I, I can't even describe. They stole everything that Derek had gotten again, and TVs, computers. I mean, that had been bought for him by a very well-known songwriter of Toto, and because Derek has some amazing, amazing friends, but he's never asked for anything from any of them. Not Cuba, not any of his high-profile friends has he asked for anything, and I don't either. We just don't do that because uh, you know they're used all the time, and we simply did not want to be there using anyone or taking advantage of anyone. We just never have done it. If I can't do it on my own, if Derek can't do it on his own, we just don't do it. We don't accept it. I'd rather I'd rather live under a bridge, than to put anybody in an uneasy situation or take advantage of anyone. If you give with your heart, and that's the way we feel. But I can tell you, when they arrested Derek, and I couldn't, and I finally found out why. There was a friend of his that a wanted him to do a video, to do videos, or something to. It was from videos to digital ties, and when Derek said, "Of course, sure." Well, when he got the stuff, it ended up being child porn. Derek was livid. I mean, livid. He was screaming at this acquaintance of his, and he said, "You come get this stuff, get it out of my place." He said, "I'm going to help you to save yourself um, from yourself." And that's exactly what happened. And this guy, apparently, and he was very wealthy at the time, and I think he is still wealthy. He was the head of several companies. He brought 7 of his friends, and they broke down Derek's gate, a secured gate. And make a long story short, Derek was yelling because, he was way in back in his office, which was the guest house in Woodland Hills. And this home was beautiful. But he was in the guest house, and which served as his office. And his friend heard somebody going down this long driveway alongside the house. And it was a big piece of property. And he says, "Somebody's coming down the driveway, and I hear a bunch of footsteps." Derek didn't even hear them breaking down the gate, but they did. And they went over it. And before you knew it, the neighbors heard Derek yelling, "Stop or I will shoot." Derek didn't shoot anybody. It didn't hurt anybody. But his friend in the back was going, "Derek, it's me, it's me, it's me. Don't shoot, don't shoot." Derek says, "What in the hell are you doing?" And but by that time, the police were there because the neighbors had heard Derek yell, "Stop or I'll shoot." Well, the police were there in the blink of an eye. And who did they arrest? It's Derek. I was like, "What?" It was something unbelievable. And Derek couldn't believe that they arrested him because he was the one holding the gun. And it was 7 counts uh, against him at that point in time. I sat in a courtroom and could not believe what I was hearing. "Oh, there were 7 of you? Oh, that's 7 counts." They were building a case against him. And I thought, this is crazy. They broke down his gate, and he was trying to protect himself and his property. And this in California. If it had happened in anywhere else, Texas, Arizona, he would have never been arrested. So we couldn't believe this, but there was another story behind this, which I can't go into at this point in time, but I can tell you that one day while he's in jail, he was supposed to appear in court, and I was talking to his lawyer, and he says, "Bradina, has Derek been bonded out?" And I went, "No." And he says, "Well, they can't find him. They think that he's escaped." And I started laughing. I said, "Are you kidding? Escaping out of a Men's County Jail? I've been there." I said, "You don't escape from that place. I mean, this is nuts." And I says, "And Derek would no more do that and rise and fly." I said, there's got to be a reason why, they didn't take him to court. They're the ones that's responsible for taking him to court. And, so the lawyer went, and because Derek was supposed to be bonded out by a very dear friend of his, a member of Toto, and he was. I mean, it was all set for him to be bonded out, but ended up somebody. There was a bunch of these guys. I think they wanted Derek soup or something, top ramen soup. Can you imagine? And of course, he was the new guy. Anyhow, they beat him up, and he ended up in medical, and they had him in an imaging machine because he was, he had a bit of scar on his head that he still has. But anyhow, he was hurt pretty badly. So the lawyer found him in medical and X-ray imaging, and he so I guess the judge thought he had escaped. It was so stupid, and he put Derek's bail up to $500,000. And so I called his lawyer and I said, "Can't you get that back down?" He said, "Bradina, I tried, and that judge, I don't know what it is, but he's keeping Derek's bail at $500,000. I said, "This is nuts. I mean, he's not done anything." I mean, it just was almost like it was like a nightmare. It was like some force was literally building and building and building on him. Little did I realize. And of course, I was on my knees every minute. I mean, praying. I mean, praying my heart out. But he ended up saying, "Mom, they say if I stay here for another year, they'll let me go." But he said, "Mom, I wanted to go to court. I wanted to take these guys to court." But he said, "By the time I got to court, Mom, it'd be another 3-4 years." He says, "And I can't be away from my daughters that long. I can't be away from my family." And during this time, his wife divorced him. It was a low time for him, very low. But he ended up going to Delano prison, which is it was where um, it's where they keep him, for a while to, put him where they're supposed to go permanently. And boy, I tell you, it was a difficult time for him. And the things that he saw in prison, I can't even tell you how horrible it was. I mean, there was a murder right in front of him. And I remember Derek writing me because he couldn't call me because it was reception. Like I said, reception is, if you have anybody in that's ever been in prison, reception is the worst. They keep you anywhere from 6 weeks. In Derek's I think it was like 3 months that he was there, which was way too long. It was ridiculous. It was like they were doing it on purpose, just passing him by. But during this time, he had some miracles, many miracles. But this is where the Lord, literally, Lord God, our Father, totally, I mean, held him down in his bunk, was all over him. And Derek was trying to tell me in letters. Um, he said, Mom, I can't even explain it. All I can tell you is that, I mean, he's all over me. He will not leave me alone. And at one point I asked him, why? Why, Father? And Father says, if not you, who? Derek says, Mom, there was nothing I could do. He would not leave me alone. And he kept, I mean, pouring the truth into my spirit, into my soul. I mean, it was like he said, I can't explain it, Mom. All I tell you is that he virtually encompassed every single part of me. I mean, every part. I mean, I couldn't get away from him. And he said, I felt like I was going to explode if I didn't get the word out with what he was trying to tell me. And he said, I got to the point where I had to talk. I just had to let the truth out, what he was giving me every moment of the day, the night. I barely slept because, he was all over me. And it was, thrusted into my soul and spirit that he said, I ended up on my stomach, uh, talking to the guys in that cell block, through the vents. And he said, when I would, every once in a while, and they were supposed to be locked up 23/7. And many times it was a lockdown. So, they didn't even get out the hour out into the day room. And once a week, I think they got out into the yard. And it was one of those times that they were out in the yard where Derek witnessed a guy being stabbed right next to him. And this guy's blood was all over Derek. And Derek said, Mom, I watched that guy die. And on his chest was tattooed a picture of his daughters. And he said, Mom, he said, I lost it because all I could do was think of my daughters. And he said, it shook me up so bad. And they stripped them all down. Derek was standing there naked with every one of these guys, that they'd, and it was to the point where Derek still had this man's blood on him. He said that was one of the worst days, Mom. I can't even tell you. But he had so many miracles. Every time he turned around, he could see something that God had done that would just blow his mind. And he would go, whoa. He said, Mom, I had more miracles. God answered more prayer. He showed me more of himself in that prison than I possibly tell you or talk about. But I wrote to him every single day. I have a letter here that, in fact, I've got lots of letters from Derek. And it was his writing, every single thing about him. Because Derek he was very self-assured, cocky, um, not easy to. He had an ego. He had an ego because he knew it all, um, but he was not. He definitely had changed. I saw the transformation not only in his letters, but after he finally got out of Delano and finally was transferred to Sierra Conservation Camp up in Jamestown. And the minute he was up there, I think he got there on a Thursday night, And Saturday, I was there to visit him. I was staying with Cuba at that time for about 3.5 months. And because Cuba, he missed me. And I missed him. We're very close. But anyhow, praise God. I was able to get up there and visit Derek. And like I said, for 6 hours on Saturday, 6 hours on Sunday. And I wish to God I could have taken in my cell phone to record him, and or a recorder. But I couldn't even write down what he was saying to me or teaching me. But I can't even tell you. I saw a totally different Derek. And as I sat across from him, I said, Derek, how in the world how do you how do you encompass every single bit of this? I mean, there was so much information that, and he was so passionate and so compassionate, not only, in his teaching, but in the way that, the other inmates, the guards, everybody looked at him and treated him with such respect and such reverence that you couldn't help but notice. It was crazy. And everybody, absolutely could not get enough of him. It was, if he went back to his bunk, or if he was out in the day room, just teach me, just teach us, Enoch. And they were all calling. Somehow somebody called him Enoch, and that stuck. And I said, well, maybe that's the spirit of Enoch that you have, which is the spirit of truth. And I can tell you that he was a totally different man. I can't explain the transformation, but I can tell you one thing. But there was not a question, not a single solitary word that he did not dissect. Every single word, every single sentence. The truth just flowed out of him. Literally, it was like diarrhea of the mouth. You couldn't shut him up. He was, on fire, absolutely on fire. And when he told me, because he was speaking Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, I said, Derek, where did you learn that? He said, Mom, it was given to me in an instant. In an instant, he said, I can understand it and I can speak it. I'm telling you, Mom, the Father has given this to me, Lord, but he said, I have to do it. I have to reach people. I have to. I tell you, I was there just as much as I possibly could because I couldn't get enough of the teaching. I wish to God that I could have taken it all in, but I couldn't. It was so difficult for me. I couldn't even explain it to you. Excuse me. But but all I can tell you is that it poured out of him. Poured out of him like I can't even tell you. He was bought, paid for by the power of the Father. And I'm telling you, there is no possible way he could escape it. And he still can't. Because if Derek had his way, he'd be out in a cave somewhere by himself. He does not want to be here. And he's made us all understand that. Excuse me. But I can tell you that this is the Derek that you see today. When somebody, tries to put him down or tries to judge him, I go, wow. Calling Derek a liar is calling the Father a liar. Because let me tell you, this is what Derek tells you. You can take it to the bank. If you don't understand it, start all the videos over again because he answers every one of the questions and continues to do so time and time again. Naturally, being his mom, I'm a little prejudiced, but I can tell you there's so much about Derek that has changed from his old self. I can't even begin to explain it. I mean, his daughters were just there. They were staying in a cabin that they were renting, and they got a good deal on it. They got a good deal on it. If it was cleaned, they didn't have pay a cleaning fee. Derek's been at that cabin for 3 days cleaning. He cleans better. He's a damn good cook. Even his ex-wife says he can clean and cook better than she could, which is true. But he is so humble, so loving, and so compassionate. But I tell you, this has been very difficult for him, because there's people that he gets like 1,500 emails a day. I can tell you that everybody thinks that he should pay attention just to them, should answer their questions right there and then. They don't understand. Everybody wants a piece of him. There's been people that's moved here just to be close to him. And I can tell you it's been very difficult because, he just loves being with Malia. He loves being with his family. He loved being with his daughters here for the last 5 days. It was wonderful. Grandsons that, one that he had never met, and the other one he had seen it like 5 months. It was a wonderful time. And so you didn't hear from him for those 5 days. But Derek never complains. He's always up. He's always happy, always positive. You'll never see Derek, I mean, bitching, complaining, being nasty. I mean, you can see the truth when he speaks. And I can tell you, all of those that try to put him down, he doesn't take it to heart. He really doesn't. Because, in fact, he prays for them. We all pray. And we pray for our enemies. And there's this time that, he went through this horrible, horrible experience. But it taught us. That's the reason why he doesn't accept money himself. If people want to send money, they send it to me. And because he lives off of donations, he does. And he doesn't live high on the hog. High on the hog is what I used to say when I was young. It was an old saying out, in the South. If you're living high on the hog. Somebody said he's worth, I think it was on another YouTube channel, they said he's worth $18 million. And we had to laugh because here's Derek in a fifth wheel trailer. He has been upgraded to a nicer fifth, but Derek lives about as simply as you can possibly get. And everybody asks why he wears black. Well, he wears black because he's in mourning for each and every one of us. That he just wants us to seek the truth for ourselves. He doesn't want you to have to believe him. He will give you the information. And that video, in fact, I've got it right up at the top of my website. It's Deception of Paul. If you haven't read that and studied it, because I'll tell you, I think it's like 24 pages long, you'll get the truth from there. And it may be truth that you may not be able to accept. That's not Derek's problem. He just tries to give you the information so that you can research yourself for the truth. Because let me tell you, He was chosen, he was commissioned by the Father. There's no doubt in my mind, because I can tell you, being around him, seeing the difference between the old Derek and this Derek is like night and day. It isn't even remotely, not even remotely the same. Like I said, he walks, he talks, he sounds the same, except when the words come out of his mouth. I've never been prouder of my son. I tell you, he doesn't have any money to speak of except, for the donations. And believe me, oh, he's so grateful for each and every one of you. I can't even tell you. There was a sweet lady that sent him $10, sent me $10 toward Derek's ministry. I said to Derek, I said, is that precious or what? I mean, this woman's on a low income, like I live on, Social Security, which is not much. And I can't even tell you, I was so blessed by this woman's $10. But of course, Derek he was so touched. I can't even tell you how touched he was. And those things matter. The heart of this woman matters so much. I can't even tell you how grateful we are, how appreciative we are for those that do give, for those that feel a passion in their heart for the truth that Derek gives out. And I can tell you, if you ever have a question about the sincerity and the compassion and the truth that my son gives, and you may not understand it, I don't even understand most of it, to be honest with you. I really don't. I wish to God I could take it in and, have it, I mean, in my brain and understand every single thing that he says. But I can tell you this much. Says you can take it to the bank because it's straight from the Father. No pass go. Excuse me. But I will end this right here. I will probably make another video because there's other things that I've got to say. But I can tell you that he is a son that I am absolutely blown away by. Blown away by go solitary thing that he teaches me. I try my best to take it in and decipher it in my in my head. Of course, I just turned 77 on Sunday. And and by the way, thank you so much for all of the birthday wishes. I can't believe I'm 77. All of my kids are in their 50s. Derek's 51, my daughter's 54, and my oldest son, who lives with me, is 56. Even his daughter couldn't believe he was 51. She said, "Isn't he in his 40s?" I said, "No, he's 51." But he's a wonderful man. And he just wants to teach you the truth. The truth is his Father has given it to him in every way, shape, and form. He lives it. He breathes it. I mean, there is nothing about Derek that is not of the Father. He's not perfect. None of us are. But I'll tell you, he's getting there more and more and more. I tell you, I so love him, so appreciate who my son has become in the Father. Believe me, he is exactly as he says he is, exactly what the Father has made him to be, has called him to be, has commissioned him to be. I can tell you, there is no one that you can't trust more than Derek, because he will not lie to you. None of us will. But Derek, he is nothing but the truth. And you can take it or you can leave it. But if you do the research for yourself, and that's all he asks, he doesn't ask that you believe him. He asks that you just find the truth for yourself. And I'm going to sign off for that. And I will probably make another video tonight sometime. You can watch it whenever you want. But I just want you to know that I appreciate each and every single one of you. And I mean, really, each and every one of you. I praise God for the wonderful people that we've met, wonderful people that have given, wonderful people that has stood by Derek through thick and thin. And then he's lost some, but it's so funny. If he loses a couple of hundred, there's 1,000 that signs up. His subscribe channel is, I mean, I can't even believe how fast it's grown. But anyhow, he appreciates us. Anyhow, God bless each and every one of you. And I just want you to know, not only does he love you, but I love you. And I will talk at you later. Bye-bye.